Maryam Hanane,
an investigative journalist.
We're here asking people about the coronavirus and what they think.
I'm here in the Sinai Desert. Come with me as I investigate.
What does all your other work have to do with Google?
In 2018, we were getting 500,000 unique visitors, and we suddenly saw the traffic go down. I wonder if Google has any links to Big Pharma.
Thank you so much for this, Miriam, especially this film, Vanishing of the Bees.
Do they know something we don't about GMOs?
There's a confusion and blaming just Monsanto when it's really we need to look at Bayer and Syngenta.
these poisons aren't just killing bees, they're also killing beings.
I'm saying that this is the virus that didn't cry wolf. Are you afraid of coronavirus?
No.
Graphene oxide, that's what got me killed on Twitter. Banned from Amazon, Instacart, Airbnb, Chase's bank account.
She gets really deep into stories, those where everyone is willing to go.
Maryam, you have been hot on the trail of Charles Lieber since this case became public.
I'm not a prostitute or a parrot.
Do not let them turn you into lab rats.
Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Truth Lives Here. I am Maryam Hanane, best known for directing the film Vanishing of the Bees. And I'm very excited to bring on Howdie Mickoski, who is the author of the book Exit the Cave. I want to just give an intro that many of you who have watched the show know that I had a Kundalini awakening in June. And that kind of put me on a different trajectory in conjunction with finishing my book on George Floyd, 688 pages. And I started looking into Ascension and looking into how to liberate from this wheel of samsara, knowing that I've been here. It's not my first rodeo. And so in my investigations, came across Howdie's work and approached him. Initially, he stated that perhaps I wouldn't want to go deep or consider that Ascension is yet another level to the Matrix. However, I'm dedicated to truth, and it's not about ego. And I have been in deep contemplation since the Kundalini awakening. And that is not necessarily meditating and making sure there's nothing in my thoughts. It's more like getting to a certain frequency and allowing for things to trickle in and then further inspecting and investigating. I want to say that upon looking into Ascension, it's quite peculiar to me that there's so much content on YouTube talking about the fifth dimension and Ascension. And so I actually considered what Howdie said as far as another level to this matrix. And I want to say also, and I will ask Howdie when I bring him on, I started reading Not in His Image by John Lash, who I believe was a Gnostic in a different life. And even though he was an astrologer for 30 years, he told me that there is only one life. And he said, well, where do you think you're going to liberate to exactly? So there's so many different theories. And one thing that really stood with me is realizing or acknowledging the character of you. And when you have remembrances, maybe it's like Westworld, you realize like, oh shit, in my case, I've been killed before for speaking out. And how can I scrutinize the character of Maryam and do things differently? I do know that when you're ascending or when you're raising your frequency, or if you're on a spiritual path, it's really about looking at your shadow and taking ownership. Sometimes it can get a little bit too mental and you can become your own worst enemy. So without further ado, welcome, Howdie.
Did you get that? Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Thank you for coming on the show. I would like to begin by if you could share with the audience a little bit about your work and your path from comedian to author in inspecting and investigating this wheel of samsara and liberation and this inverted matrix of bullshit that we found ourselves in.
Sure. I've lived a very odd life, and I can give a very brief overview, and then you're welcome to ask anything else you'd like to ask.
Yes.
As always, before I start with anything that I say, I always like to let everyone know that what I share is my own experience and my own 35 years of work, and it's just meant to get people to think and ask questions. I don't want anyone to necessarily instantly believe something I say, or the opposite, instantly disregard anything I say. It's just it's information to get you to think. That's really what it's there to do. I had a pretty normal life growing up in Canada. Hockey player, etc. Just doing a normal life. Within a few years, I had some pretty heavy experiences. I had a psychopath for a father, and he wound up stealing all my money just before I was about to finish university. And so it made finishing my university degree, which I did eventually, but it was very, very difficult to get that completed. As soon as that was done, my ex-girlfriend was murdered. So it was like within the period of about a year, I had these two intense, and I'm not saying that my traumas are worse than anyone else's traumas, but they were traumas that certainly affected this character at the time strongly. And it pushed me out of a normal way of seeing, you might say. It pushed me out of a normal way of thinking that if you just lived a particular way, the world will work out for you, that everything will work out fine. And I've just now seen, well, that's just garbage. And so I spiraled into about a 3-year depression. It got to the point when in 1997, I was ready to kill myself. I just didn't want to be. It's not so much I didn't want to be in the world anymore. I didn't like the thing I saw in the mirror anymore. I thought the thing in the mirror had become very manipulative and very mean. But I just couldn't come up with a good way to kill myself and not have a mess for the person who would have to clean it up. In the midst of that, a television program came on that was for a Nova, a pyramid building program. And it was like an instantaneous flash of light of like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. Ancient Egypt has a secret and you're supposed to go find it. So I spent 8 years doing that. But in the course of those 8 years, I got very, very lucky. So I wound up working with a Korean monk for about a year. Then it was time over the course of 3 or 4 years with 3 different native medicine men, one Ojibwe, one Tsuut'ina, and one Lakota. I had time with a Qigong doctor from Beijing, time with a teacher of the Bakwa. So I was finding these people who were unfindable, basically. These are people that don't function in the world. These are very still secretive, either living on the reserve or in the case of Mr. Park, just never left his house. And so that pushed me to a certain point. I finished that book. I thought I knew something. I thought I was quite smart. And then I had a death experience where I fell into a river in a canyon right near a waterfall. And in that experience, I had spent 8 years prior to that working. One of the big tests that these teachers had given me was to test reality, prove that it's real. And of course, it didn't. It didn't prove that reality, but I was still real. The world was fake, but I was real. And when I fell into the canyon and had that experience, the realization was, oh, right, I'm just as fake as reality, right? It's all just, it's all one giant illusionary experience. But I came out of that with a combination of great clarity and great confusion, what I write about in my newest book. And I went through an illness for about 8 years, an illness that I was at the point constantly almost feeling like I was going to die. I saw 50 different healers. I got 50 different diagnoses, 50 different ways to go through. Nothing ever worked. And kind of when I finally got comfortable with what I had been shown, what I'd been taught, and what the experience was, and started writing these books, the illness just went away. And that's the short overview. And now I write and say things that the majority of people don't like to hear, but it's not negative. It sounds negative to the wall that's been placed in front of the truth of what you are. And to get to the other side of that, where I think my message is quite positive. It's just you can't get to the part that's positive until you go through all the negative walls that are in front. So it sounds challenging, but if anyone listens to what I have to say, it's actually, I think, quite a message in at the end.
So with that, a few just quick things. Where I grew up in Montreal, Canada, I also studied at Simon Fraser University. Where are you from?
I grew up in Ontario mostly. Lived in Ottawa for a lot of my life, and we went to University of Wilfrid Laurier.
Yeah, my mom lives in Elmer. And the next thing is, when I look at, obviously your father stealing from you, when I look at my dad and I realize that this isn't my first rodeo and that these characters, I may have encountered them before. In this life, my dad plays a newborn Christian who worked at Pfizer, who basically has disowned me, didn't want to have a child, tried to abort me. And, there's this life stuff that comes up to process and forgive and let go. But then there's also an acknowledgement of like, I think he's killed me before. I think I've encountered this character in different permutations, and that I'm making a conscious decision to not interact with this person again. And so I want to know if did that kind of contemplation or looking at who is this father in this life and why did he show up this way?
Well, in the beginning, it was just a recognition of needing to be sane. I would say that that's the core of anything. Once you realize you're one way or another living in an insane reality, then the number one thing is, how do you find personal sanity? I don't need to fix the world or anyone else. It's just find sanity. So I think even 40 years ago, that was like a key part of it. So it was just as long as I was going to remain relatively sane, but it took a long time. I had a lot of work to do to get what Richard Rose would call my house in order, which is the mind, to have the mind at a place where it's completely still and it's clean through all of those old traumas. It takes a long time. But I've also had experiences. I mean, I've gone through the mystical experience gamut, and I've seen myself die in other versions of my life. So I know there's 10 million me's who've lived 10 million or 100 million different me lives with all sorts of, which makes sense. I mean, why would you want to have just one character having one experience in one round of a video game that's limited? Why not have the character live a billion different total experiences? And I've tracked a number of my parallel lives, called parallel lives or looping lives, whatever you want to call them. And none of them are out of the order, not out of possibility. Every single one I could have seen, with just a slight alteration here, a slight alteration there. That life was completely plausible. And so now I realize it's just stories. Right, it's just stories I'm having in another layer of the video game. And as always, trauma turns out we hate to go through it, but it's an unfortunate part of the way this place is built. But when you're having a happy dream, you don't want to wake up. Only when you're starting to have a nightmare do you want to get out. So unfortunately, trauma is part of the waking up process.
In regard, is your dad still alive? No.
No, he died 5 years ago, I guess. I hadn't talked to him in 25 years or something. and the information just popped up one day on the internet.
And about his death?
Yeah.
In your contemplation, did you need to come to a place of forgiveness and doing Ho'oponopono, or no?
No, once I came to the realization that he doesn't exist, it was quite a. Once you realize that reality is not real, that reality is just a projection. It's a type. We'll call it a type of projection. That's the best way of describing it, as how it's been revealed. So once it's a type of projection, you begin to lose your hold on labeling anything, right? It's an experience. The character went through that experience, and that's really all it is. There's no emotional charge because it's just an experience that happened. Now it's taken time to transform that, in a sense, to recognize that this is a person who was filled with their own life of trauma, filled with their own parasitic entities, filled with their own just inner garbage. And so all that was happening was that inner garbage was being projected at me, and it just continued as long as I was willing to somehow say that I have to accept anything outside of myself. And again, once people like Mr. Park and the native medicine people began to reorganize my mind, reorganize the way that I saw myself in reality, then this just began to heal itself kind of on its own. I've also done a life recapitulation. So part of what she's describing here would have happened on its own in the life recapitulation. So that's why it's very hard for me to describe it, because in the recapitulation, which is reviewing every moment of your life, going back to birth, it took me about 4.5 years to do that. But in the course of that, you literally unwind every experience of your life and see it in minute detail, and remove all of the emotional charges. So when I was done my first recap, which was in 2005, most of the emotional charges of a lot of my past was gone. A little bit was still left, but most of it had already been taken away. So I didn't have to do it sort of the way most people would look at something like that. I recapped it. So by recapping my life, I managed to see everything in utter clarity.
So in studying your work and listening to your videos, about 2 years ago, I heard "Get your house in order." And at the time, I took it a little bit too literally, where I thought, well, you better pick somewhere where you're okay never to move again because of the transhumanist agenda that is afoot. So when I heard this kind of different take, although I had started doing that and I've been on a spiritual journey since 13, and I think part of the evolution of a soul is being able to sit here and look at yourself and take ownership for the experiences you've created. And it's not what happens to you, but what you do with what happens to you. So I just wanted to share that. Another thing, I don't know if you want to say something to that.
I'm just waiting. No, just letting you go, and then when you have a question, we'll just throw it out.
And another thing that I resonated with, knowing now that most of these content influencers are compromised, whether they know it or not, is, you said anyone kind of worth their salt is not going to necessarily be well known, because all of these, let's say, personages, the Joe Rogans or the Alex Joneses, not that they're on a spiritual mission or quest, are not giving us 100% truth. I call them tries, truth mixed with your lies. And I think, the avatar, you could pick a regular avatar that's just going through the motions in the matrix, but to choose the path of, let's say, divine truth or introspection or ownership or liberation is not an easy path, and that a lot of the tests that one comes across is maybe to take you off of your path. Will you listen to yourself and your own inner truth, or will you succumb to the norm or what everybody else is doing? So I'm just curious what you have to say in regards to that.
In a sense, like what would be, how would you frame that as a question? Like,
so as a question, would you think, looking back at the events in your life, were all tests to maybe choose another way or to go deeper in your soul's evolution?
No, they're just experiences in a dream.
Okay. And
See,
what is it?
Yeah. That's where people already get caught.
Yeah.
They have to make their life important. They have to make me important. They have to make me special. Look what I'm doing. Look what I know. Look what I have. Look, whatever, you know, or the opposite. I'm so terrible. I'm so awful. It's always a giant definition of who and what they are. And that's why there's two cores, as far as I'm concerned, to work on yourself. One is self-definition. You have to define yourself completely and totally. So first you have to define the thing you see in the mirror every day. This thing, what is it? How does it think? How does it function? Why does it function the way that it does? But that's a very minor part of the work. Eventually it's to say, how do I know any of this thing is real? How can I prove my own reality? And if you go really deep into that work, you start moving to the realization of emptiness, which is something completely different, and which is something that you can't sell, which is why in most cases the spiritual community won't talk about it in the way that it's really meant. Then the other side is what you're talking about, which is getting your house in order, which is really getting your mind in order eventually to the place where it can see clearly and it can operate in a way that is without emotional intake, without feeling, that it's able to see the awareness. It's pure awareness, and that's a lot of work. And that's the other side, which is going through what we call the matrix, going through Plato's cave and unraveling everything that is in, we'll call it perception, that again we've believed to be a certain way, or again has importance, or has some sort of direction of our life. But until you define what life is and who's having this life, it's all just a giant series of beliefs that no one can verify what or if anything they're doing really has any value.
Would you think that maybe, not to make it about gender, but that maybe as a man it's easier to remove from emotion? I would agree that it is important to kind of clear the emotional charge. I would admit that I've failed many times because I have this kind of righteous anger, and I'm very into integrity and accountability and honesty and sacredness in the face of Satan, and no accountability. I mean, I believe this matrix has gotten more and more of a clown show ridiculousness, but there's not a lot of people that are taking ownership. So I know that's a lot, but I want to talk about this, removing this emotional charge. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your process. Were you ever emotional, or?
Sure, of course, everybody is. That's the ballast that holds one into the dream, right? The emotion is the initial grasping point to this reality. It's all through emotion. That's why everyone is either chasing love or running away from fear. They're both very intense emotions. And really, and it's not wrong when I'm saying this, but generally 99.9% of people come to whatever spiritual path they're coming to because they're in pain. They're suffering. They feel something wrong inside, and they're looking to get fixed somehow. They're looking to feel better. I was too, right? That was an initial. I wasn't necessarily on a massive truth-seeking hunt right from day one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's there in everybody's underlying case. The problem becomes if that's what somebody's really seeking, there are lots of things within this reality that can make you feel better, can improve you, can heal you, can actually calm you down. But if that's the goal, then they'll stop. And there's lots of those out there, people who have taken a step or two, and they really have. They've really taken a step or two up the ladder, but they've taken the step to what they were hoping to find, and they can't even imagine that there could be anything beyond that. Thankfully, I was shared very early on the danger of getting stuck in a plateau, no matter how good it feels, at what you would lose by staying there. And so, thanks to Mr. Park, the Korean monk, his very bizarre teachings were eventually understood. It took me 10 or 15 years in many cases to start understanding what he was saying. But that was a big impetus to keep going, because I wanted self-definition. I wanted to know who was having this life, and if it meant anything, what death was, and to not have a belief system of that, but to have had a complete personal realization of what that was. So I kept going until that was going to be found. And I don't want to say to anyone, I think I'm done.
Right.
But let's just say I'm at the doorway, and I'm really close to walking out.
Let's say, removing the emotional charge, what would then distinguish us from, let's say, an AI or psychopaths who have no emotion, because those emotions can serve as indicators to make you go into one direction or not.
Sure, of course, emotions exist from the human form. They'll always exist. When you're hungry, when you need food, you get hunger. That's an emotion. And emotions are meant to get your attention. That's really what they're meant to do, right? One way or another, it's a chemical reaction in the body that we're supposed to recognize. Message. What do I do with that? And then the emotion's supposed to go away. Humans have built themselves a very bizarre system where the emotional charge comes, the information is received, but then the emotion doesn't go away. It just keeps building. It keeps continuing. The same emotion just keeps going. It'd be like getting the message of hunger, eating, and then just staying hungry for the next 4 weeks. That's kind of what humans have done. So what I mean by removing the emotional charge, it's to allow any emotion that comes, it can be seen, it's recognized. If you have to act upon that emotion, great. If not, you just don't act upon it. You just let it go, and then they just go away. So because as anyone who's been in a chaotic or challenging or life-threatening situation will know, if you get caught in an emotion in that moment, you will not think clearly and you will not act well. Someone who's been in a car accident, if you ask them, and when they'll talk about time slowing down, and they know how to move their head here or move their head there to avoid some pole that's coming through the car windshield at them, they'll tell you later, if you ask them honestly, that there was no emotion involved, that there wasn't emotion happening, and there wasn't even thought. When I was in the canyon and I had fallen into that river and was getting ready to go over the falls and had acknowledged that this is where I was going to die, all thought was gone. It just burned itself away. It was just non-existent, and it had been seen that it was always non-existent. It was always a gigantic lie from the second I was brought into this reality. What was left was these, I called them giant clusters of information. And those clusters of information would just come up and they'd explode, and there would be total understanding, and then the next cluster would come. So that's what I mean. What all the emotion does, if it's held on to, it blocks these what I call clusters of total information that are always available. So it's not that someone is emotionless, right? We have an emotion, like right now, there's an emotion, I'm having one, but I don't need to hold on to it. It's there. I can see it. I can see if it has any, if I need to do anything about it, and then it just goes. So that's what it becomes a way of allowing the emotion to be there, to have been seen, to have in a sense been checked. Do I need to do anything with it? Yes or no? And then just let it go.
So in a way,
and again, I'll also add on top of it.
Yeah.
You mentioned like you have a righteous anger, right? So if you tell that to a lot of people, they'll tell you there's something wrong with you. Oh, you're not supposed to be angry. Or anger is actually like anything else. It's an emotion, and it has value if you use it properly. Every emotion is valuable if you use it properly. There's no emotion that's let's say bad or anyone shouldn't have. So I'm just reminding that when someone hears Maryam say righteous anger, that righteous anger can do a lot if you use it properly.
But what I'm hearing also is you become, I mean, it's about self-realization. It's about mastering the self and not letting those emotions dictate every move, being able to watch them. What I've been doing recently is, I mean, I have someone who I believe is a mirror, and that has a similar soul frequency that has shown me a lot of my shit, and I choose to see what I'm projecting onto the other person, or what the other person is showing me. And I've, let's say, initially, have this vomit of anger, but I won't share it with them, or I'll sit with it and I'll actually use my heart to transmutate it. And for me, Ascension, because I do believe in frequencies, I believe we're attacked, we're living in a prison, and that there is a way to ascend where you raise your frequency, where you can be in a place of, I'm looking at the Hawkins scale, be in a place of neutrality, be in a place of acceptance, and use that anger, but then, like you say, discharge, like transmutate it and get to the root. What is this triggering? What is this showing me? And what comes to me? And not allowing it to just dictate every, I'm not, obviously I failed many, many times, but not being a victim of whatever wanton emotion will come up, and having the maturity to just observe it. Whereas like I've experienced something as of late where, I would say like, regular schmo person would have acted out in retaliation or anger, or devolved and made it a lot worse, and choosing to stay in a, let's say, exalted place as best I can. What do you think about that?
From what aspect?
As far as not, as far as transmutating something that comes up and using that emotion to be able to see what layers are underneath, that may even include another life, or I don't know if you believe in past lives, or you believe everything is happening, everything all at once, or both. If you believe in
nothing
both.
is happening.
Nothing is happening. But you've said that you've witnessed or observed other parallel lifetimes.
Sure, but they're still just another character's experience in a video game.
And so, okay, so let's talk about this whole Ascension movement, because when you go, one, I'm a little dubious of YouTube, period, who's allowed there, who's not allowed there. And there is no shortage of information.
And how the platform operates. It's a very strange energy on everything that happens, no matter what the video is there. It's a very odd place. Yeah.
Yeah, it is odd. I don't know why some are allowed, but in the world of spirituality and ascension, mind you, I was looking at the Great Reset and investigating transhumanism and this bioweapon and George Floyd. So I was very much looking at the dark. And I'll just share an experience that after this Kundalini awakening, then I went and I did some plant medicine, and I was told, you're done looking at the dark side. You were given an assignment and you didn't whore out your soul, and you're not going to look at the darkness anymore. You're going to go back to your original fascination, which was at a very young age, looking at the soul. What are the mechanics of the soul? What, so it kind of put me on a different path. But so what is my point here? That I believe that the heart and having compassion, that the heart can allow you to kind of filter things and see them differently, rather than just succumbing to, reacting, being more in a position of responding and contemplating, and allowing an experience to have you go deeper and look at yourself as the character, like in the West world, like, oh shit, I've been killed before for speaking out. And I don't want to just succumb to the character of Maryam. I want to choose a different way, or I want to evolve my soul. So I know there's no questions. I'm kind of like, if there's something that I've said that you'd like to respond to, I guess I'm talking about using the heart and different frequencies, and your definition of ascension in light of all of these content influencers who are talking about astrology, who are talking about the 5D compared to the 3D. I mean, do you think that's all BS? Because from my perspective, being in the fifth dimension is an exalted place. It's a different frequency, and there is a delineation between this 3D bullshit and being in your higher consciousness.
Sure, it's still false though. It's still part of the Matrix, still part of Plato's cave. It's just a nicer place.
Yeah. So what are your what are your thoughts on this whole ascension movement, or can you talk about what you mean by yet another layer to the Matrix?
Sure, it's another lie that's being presented to spiritual people to when the shift comes to the new simulation, when this simulation ends soon and the new one gets started, they're going to need various reasons for people don't go anywhere, for their we'll call it soul awareness interaction, to move to the new simulation. Most will move to it out of some kind of fear. Some will move it just out of straight manipulation, and then some will move to it because they'll believe that they are moving to this higher, wonderful level, that they have somehow they've done all of this wonderful work, so now they're special enough to go to this now special place, and it'll probably be like that for a while, sure, but like anything, it's either you're in Plato's cave or you're not. And it doesn't matter what part of Plato's cave you're in, as long as you're in the cave, you're in the cave. And yeah, some places in the cave are much nicer than other places in the cave, but it comes down to, see, in a lot of cases, there's not much I can really say, because all of these ideas are, in a sense, really nothing of what I talk about now, which is really for those people who've said, I'm completely tired with the experience of being in the Matrix. I'm tired with the experience of being in a fictional character. I'm tired with the experience of being in a place which is just a building of suffering, designed to steal energy to keep the entire simulation running, and I want to be home. So for those that actually want to go home, right? This is a really challenging piece that people don't get. If you go and happen to Google search, I've done it, exit the Matrix, you will get a list of what that means. It'll be from, going to live in the forest, to getting rid of your smartphone, to living from your heart, to raising your vibrational frequency, to overcoming the government, changing the financial system. But that's still the matrix. All you're doing is you're in a sense, what someone's doing is they're trying to change the props in the theater production. The difference is deciding, I'm not going to be on stage anymore. I'm gone.
So what does entail going home, going back to the stars? Let's say
it starts by waking up that which actually needs to wake up, which is not Howdie. Howdie's never had to wake up. He's never had to do anything because Howdie's not asleep. Howdie's a projected fictional character in a fictional world. What the Gnostics would have called a divine spark, or if we take in mythology or in fairy tales, Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty is asleep. Sleeping Beauty is in a coma. The divine spark is what's in a coma and is caught in the projection because the projection has very little input from the truth of what you are. And so what actually has to happen is that has to wake up. That's the thing that wakes up, and that's the thing that exits the matrix. It's also another challenging thing that people don't usually want to hear, and that is only truth can exit the matrix. Nothing false can exit the matrix. And the problem is everything we've come to believe we are and would bet our life on is false. But when we find what is actually true, when what is actually true is revealed, and that's the thing that leaves the matrix. Like Howdie's not leaving the matrix. Can't. This has been built in the matrix and will be consumed by the matrix. But the totality of what's behind all of this, that divine spark, that fire, that is the thing that can return. We would call it, and I hate having to use Gnostic terminology but because a lot of people are not going to be versed in the Mayan Papaval or ancient Egypt or a lot of other. So unfortunately for a Western English-speaking audience, the Nag Hammadi texts happen to be the best use we have. Yeah. So they would call it the Pleroma, which is that which was we'll call it manifest originally before this thing that we're calling the matrix, or we're calling the reality we experience in, or the universe, or the place of the demiurge. It's to return that awareness back to its original origin, which means you have ended its. See, this is the other challenging thing, right? The challenging thing is you have to know the trap. You have to know the makings of the matrix. You have to see its evil, sick designs. You have to see the ways that it's been trapping and lying and manipulating you for centuries and eons. Yet at the same time, the great realization is to see that what you are is emptiness. What you are is actually nothing, and only something can be trapped. Nothing cannot possibly be trapped in anything. So once you return to the truth of what you are, in a sense, the trap is automatically ended, because you no longer can associate that which is in the matrix itself. It's a complete 180-degree switch from seeing that to only seeing this. And by this, I mean that over there.
Would someone accuse you of being a nihilist? Or I'm sure for some listening to this, they'll get cognitive dissonance because it won't feel very good, and they'll just dub it as negative instead of
right. Here's a great metaphor then for people. Let's put it into Christian terms. If we take the entire matrix and we put the matrix and compare it to water. So as you look in the Matrix movies, it was always shown as water. So we have the matrix being water, but we have the truth of what you are being fire. We have the false of what you are, the story of Narcissus, looking into the water, seeing his reflection, and then falling in love with the reflection, which is just what's happening. There's been a projection. We've fallen in love with the projection. But the fire is the great power and the truth of what we are. So in Christian terminology, when Jesus is walking on the water, that's not some sort of Godhead story. What that is he's saying he's walking on the matrix, meaning he's no longer sinking into the lies of the matrix, which means he's no longer believing or can be subject to anything that's false, because all he would be is the internal fire of the truth of what he is. So to me, that's a very powerful, positive message, which is the recognition of once you've got your divine spark enlightened again, and you might say it's back on fire, what's happening is you're getting to the point where you stop sinking into the matrix. And when you stop sinking into the matrix will stop, what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to drag you into the quicksand.
So I want to talk about a couple of things. One, this reset. I've also seen some of your work on the expositions and showing how history has been erased. Are the solar flares part of this reset that has happened before? Is that, in your opinion, why they're wanting to meld man with machine to try to outlive this latest reset? And is the simulation reset something that can be stopped, or it's just cyclical and it's almost time?
When you realize that all of this is energy, that's all it is, and it's energy extraction. So all the creatures here are here just to have their experience, to have their energy extracted for the system itself, so the machine can keep running. The problem is the way this reality is set up is we have the machine here and we have the creatures here, whether they're humans, animals, trees, whatever. So as anyone who's taken any physics knows, there's space. If I'm pulling energy from there to here, some of that heat's going to get lost in the transfer process, right? Makes sense. So what's happening is when we're going into the new, they're running out of power right now. We'll call them the beings that run this particular matrix, have realized that they need to increase the power to keep the matrix going. If the matrix stops, they all die. All those who are divine sparks just return home. The trapping mechanism is no longer in place. So the demiurge and the archons have to keep the system running. So they need more energy. So the way to get more energy is, since you can't produce more divine sparks to steal energy from, all you have to do is this. If you merge the energy beings with the machine system itself, then there's no energy loss. So all of that energy loss that's wasted by the way the extraction process happens now, by, in a sense, being plugged into a system for the new simulation, just means that the energy extraction will be much smoother and much more complete. When everyone understands that the new, what's being called a reset, is really just a new simulation getting ready to be switched on, that will have very different energetic extraction elements to it, and very different parameters of exactly how the simulation will be built from the standpoint of the code. It's not a computer, but from the standpoint of analogy, with a very different set of coding than is here right now. So once a soul moves into that stage, it's going to be difficult. It's difficult to get out of this particular reality. This is really difficult to awaken from. I mean, you're talking 1% of 1% of 1%, maybe. That's realistic numbers. That's how hard it is. But in the next, which is 5, which will be a 5D, D to me meaning depth. So we're going down one more layer into the quicksand, right? You don't want to go to 5D. You want to go 1D. You want to go D in depth. You want to start back to oneness, the first original unity of the matrix, and then from there say, oh yeah, now how can I get out of the matrix? So again, it's all a giant deception, like everything. This is the hard part for, I think, anyone to really recognize. Everything we've ever been taught about everything is not actually false. It's slightly true, but masked with a huge amount of deception. So that's false is easy to see through. If someone just tells you a complete lie, you can see through that in a few minutes if you're just thinking. But if someone gives you a little bit of truth and plays around with it and distorts it, and that can take years to figure out that you've been lied to. And unfortunately, that's how this reality on all levels, now I just don't mean on the material level, on the etheric level, the astral level, the heavenly level, the super duper realm, it's all one giant realm of constant deception. And that's why it's so hard to break free, because we like to think that there's something we can hold on to and believe, and that tends to be almost nothing. And so it really is a difficult path, because once you start going in this direction, you start losing your foundation. You start losing the footing of what I believe. And that's why house in order is so important. If you don't have your house in order, meaning you're not functioning smoothly here, you don't have your traumas cleaned up, you don't have a mind that is calm and clear and able to, in a sense, let's say, be your friend, then as you start going on the path, there's going to be too many crack points where the majority of people, unfortunately, will crack. So that's why, even though it sounds very simplistic, when people say, well, what does getting your house in order mean? Well, it means this, 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 and this. Well, that doesn't sound very special. That doesn't sound very spiritual. Well, it may not sound like that now, but if in 2 or 3 years, these sorts of things start to be seen through for you, and these parts of reality begin to be burst open, you're going to be really thankful you did this foundation work before, because then your mind is going to be really still, really calm, and it's going to be able to handle a very difficult place. And so there is a step-by-step progression to this, and there was a reason that in the ancient past, things were done as a sort of, they don't try to move you ahead 10 times at once. They move you ahead one step at a time, so that the entire energetic structure of the mind is moving in a particular speed. And unfortunately, there's actually some useful stuff out there. I'm not saying that like everything you can run into is garbage, or every time you hear someone talk, no, there actually is some very valuable stuff. Yeah. It's just, the problem is sometimes it's presented in such a way that it makes a person think, oh, I can do that. I'm sure I can. And you, in a sense, you can, but the question is, should you? The question is that your next step? And that's another important part of any part of the journey is to know, where am I now? Like, where am I actually now in the journey? And what's the next step? And then that's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about 10 steps ahead. It's just the next one. And then when the next one is taken, just, well, what's the next one? And if you do that continually, eventually you'll wind up at the end.
That's also, part of, be here now, and the power of now instead of being in the past or being in the future. As far as going back to 1D, I don't know if you've read the book Simulacrum, but it's like we're in one copy after the other, and we get further and further away from the divine spark. And I call them tries, truth mixed with lies. And to be able to discern, I listen to a lot of people in doing pattern recognition and getting something and seeing if it resonates with me. But also, I think that the ability to be able to look and go, oh, that's a truth, that's a truth, that's a lie, that's a truth, that ability is...
That won't work.
No?
Actually, no. Because you can't go towards truth because you don't know what it is. What you can do is find false. That's obvious. So the way truth is found is not by going forward to a supposed thing you think you're looking for. The way it's done is dropping things. Every time you find false, from as simple as like, hey, I shouldn't have 8 cups of coffee in the morning, to much more complete, detailed, and powerful stuff from your mind and your life and reality. But it's dropping, it's dropping, it's dropping. And eventually, if you do that long enough, you'll come to one thing that no matter how hard you try, you can't drop it. That's the truth. We literally walk into the truth backwards, and it should surprise the hell out of you. if someone thinks they've found truth and it's exactly what they thought it was going to be, and it's extremely wonderful, you probably fooled yourself. Ultimate truth is going, for anyone that's really found it, one thing they all have in common is they say it's nothing like I ever thought it was going to be. And so that's the method. It's just keep retreating from error, retreating from false, retreating from that's what's incorrect, not even worrying what truth actually is. Now you can have, we'll call them current truths from the standpoint of how you as a form, right, want to live in this reality. So if someone says, hey, I'm choosing to live in a way where I'm going to have compassion and kindness for other people. Okay, that's going to be a truth I have at the current moment. It's actually not a bad strategy, shown up by a guy like Schopenhauer. But you still know that that's just a current truth in the reality as it is now. And there could be a point in time down the future when you even say, I'm willing to drop that. It's just a relative truth. All relative truths are potentially droppable at any point in time. They're serving a function right now for the character that's playing out the story. So the game is still, it's just dropping false, dropping false, dropping false. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but whatever method anyone chooses, that's actually the path. That's it. And then, like I say, one day you try your hardest to drop it and you can't, and it's like, there it is. Who would have guessed? That's the truth. Wow. Amazing.
How would that play into, let's say, having love for someone where you have, I'm speaking from my experience, that I have, my soul loves someone. I don't understand it in this 3D because on the surface it looks very bad, or very, there's a deception of appearances, but my heart has a pure love that is true for me, that I'm not able to control it. Or does that make any sense?
It's another way the dream likes to keep you occupied on external, right? Everybody has their ways of the matrix just wants you focused out there, and it doesn't care whether you like it or you hate it. As long as your focus is there and on what's happening around you, the matrix is winning. As soon as someone is at the point where they are only concerned with what's here, and in fact, their concern is to be an unbelievably still observer of everything, then that's the point where the things can transform on their own. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's these challenges that if we examine these emotions, you'll find that they're not what you think they are. We've been told how important they are and how they're supposed to be the guiding force of our lives, but no one's ever really gone. It's like no one's gone and checked it out. Even like, here's a great one. This is for anybody out there. If you're with the next spiritual teacher, you're at some retreat with some great, session with whatever. And if they're talking about the ego, for example, it's this terrible thing. You have to overcome this ego. Ask them quite clearly, what is it? Like, define it specifically. You'll notice that they don't. They talk about it. They talk about this ego thing and how you need to overcome it, or you need to do this, or you need to kill it, or you need to transform it, but they never define it. And that should be, these are some of the things that should really get you interested. Like, wait a minute, right? If I don't know even what it is, how should I know what to do or not do with it? So again, it all comes back to self-definition. Before we can try to figure out what we should do or not do with anything, we actually have to totally define it first and figure out, what is this? What is thought? What is an emotion? What is a feeling? What is an ego? What is a mind? What is an experience? What is a perception? And until we actually know without a doubt the totality of what that is and where it comes from, You know, thoughts are a great one because you don't start thinking, right? You get up in the morning and the thoughts just start on their own. And what's so curious about them is the day you finally, because I almost say, oh, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that, is the day you get your first opportunity to observe your thought and realize, wait a minute, if I'm seeing my thoughts, I can't be my thoughts. I am actually the witnesser of my thought. And then one day you get to realize, wait a minute, now I'm the witnesser of the witnesser who was witnessing those thoughts. So I'm not even that witnesser anymore. I'm some other awareness. How deep does this go? How many layers do I actually have? And that's the challenging process of self-definition. And it's not for the faint of heart, but I can say that every time you crack a new layer or make the next plateau, there is an unbelievable relief for a while and an unbelievable clarity for a while. And as long as you don't get stuck there and keep going, well, clarity will go away as you go to the next layer. But that is Mr. Park used to tell us, it's a useful stage. Don't rush through it too quickly. Take a break in the plateau and enjoy the work you've done and kind of enjoy the stage you've reached. And then after, he would kind of say after a few weeks, like, okay, get your sword back, time to go to work.
So I want to make the distinction as far as the feeling of love for someone that you may not fully know, or moving from your intuition or heart is what I'm talking about, as opposed to just looking at what's on the surface, knowing that there's a deception of appearances. And with this particular person, there's been many instances where I am shown, look, if you just believed the surface, you could have went down this road and acted in this way, but you trusted your soul and heart that there's something else, and that you are being shown a lesson, which is deception of appearances, and not just believing the 3D and understanding that there's something else, and actually having that person mirror things in me. So it's not like I'm not talking about the distraction of like, I'm going to get lost in this love thing or chasing this person, but actually having them as a mirror to go deeper within the self. And my point here was like, instead of following the masses of what someone would look on the surface and say, oh, this person is doing this or this person is doing that, and choosing to trust myself and seeing that it's that trust and that in myself that has been able to alchemize a situation to make sure it doesn't derail into shit. So that wanted to make that distinction. I'm not talking about just, being distracted by a boy or wanting to distract myself to not look within as what it's bringing up, to go further within myself, to peel the layers of deception within. I don't know. I mean, have you had an experience with another person other than teachers that on the surface it looks one thing, and if you just followed the 3D, you could have just been trapped or have something become dramatic and devolve?
Everything in 3D is designed to get trapped and devolve and turn your focus onto something else. That's what everything is going, and that doesn't mean to ignore the reality. It doesn't mean to ignore situations. It doesn't mean to not pay attention to what's going on.
Feed into it.
But it's been a lot of work, and I still can't say that I am I've developed any sort of mastery over it. I don't want anyone to start thinking that I'm, trying to project any kind of specialness here. I'm just sharing the story of how things have gotten to this point. But now the important thing is being the observer for me, and allowing allowing reality to kind of do what it wants to do, as long as the body thing itself is not being, irritated or injured in some way. Like, obviously, if someone's throwing, bricks at me, well, I'll move my head. I'm not going to just stand there with a brick hit you in the head. But by the same token, it's always looking to see what's the trick. No matter what happens now, it's always whatever's going on externally. The first question is, what's the trick? The illusionist is doing something, right? The illusionist is doing A, and the illusionist is showing B because it wants me to look over there so I don't see what's really going on over there. And so that's kind of how I sort of treat reality now, with everything that goes on, whether there's people or no people, experiences, no experiences, on a worldly level or on the most simplistic level, is what's the trick? What's the trick going? What's the thing that's trying to get me to break out of the stillness? And they're subtle. They're subtle. They are. And this reality, boy, they know us so good. They know all the ways that they can get that little rise out of us, or that little distraction, or that little whatever. And but man, did I get caught for years. Did I get sucked into garbage, sucked into stupidity, sucked into chasing all sorts of, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to, and really my life finally changed when I was just, I just have to do this. Why? I don't know. I don't really know. Is it going to do anything good? No, I don't really think it's, when I wrote Exposing the Expositions in 2019, I was going to be shocked that even 20 people would buy the book and read it. Like, I had to write the book after I'd seen this stuff I got to get this out of my system, actually. And really, the only reason I'm here still talking to anybody is actually the long down the road, 5 or 6 years from that book. But I had had I tried to write that 15, 20 years ago, then I would have been writing it with some sort of, what's that going to do for me attitude? And it would have definitely gone nowhere. My Egyptian book went out. It could have been really interesting. It was like a thing that went off a cliff, like the roadrunner or the coyote off the cliff, and just smacked in the bottom of the ground. And that was because what was behind the book wasn't really, I've got something I just want to share and I'm going to share it. It was, I've got something I want to share, and what's in it for me for sharing it. And so it took a long time to make that change personally, to just being in the world. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. And how it plays out is fine. Just, it's okay.
Well, what I'm hearing also, as far as watching, and there's, what I've been learning is learning again, is surrender, as opposed to being a control freak and trying to make things happen. I do believe, we have these different energies, masculine energy and feminine energy within, and that part of the matrix is flip-flopping the sexes and making sure that they don't acknowledge or discover their divine spark. So that's what comes to mind, of like, I'm learning surrender and trust again. As far as, I can say with my George Floyd book, I didn't choose to spend 4.5 years investigating a very dark, but I feel like it chose me to just have it for the record, because it was fascinating to learn how evil and the level of deception. I sure learned a lot about the inverted matrix, but like the book I've started writing now, which is about reincarnation and magical, it's a tale of magical realism, much more fulfills my soul. And I definitely didn't do this to have accolades, or if anything, it's gotten me pretty targeted. So I want to talk to you about targeting, because on one level you can turn your mind into a maze of fuckery, and at the end, and on the other end, I have a sense of knowing that there's something that's standing in my way, and it's not my negative thoughts, because I tend to look at a cup half full, and I'm always trying to troubleshoot, and I think outside of the box. However, this force that has now, Cheese Slice can speak to, I'm restricted on IG. I have lost Venmo, Vimeo, PayPal, GoFundMe, Instacart, Airbnb. They've come after my company. I've had people infiltrate my company, and I'm not a victim, but I have been victimized for speaking out the truth against transhumanism and the vaccine, and this George Floyd psyop, which is all a psyop on many levels. So how, what guidance, given your years of work, to kind of thwart these forces? Or does that even make sense? I mean, do you know anyone else? Do you know people who are targeted?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So would there be any wisdom you can impart on
I'll leave it as a metaphor, and then you can kind of unravel it.
Okay.
Richard Rose used to talk about one of the key elements of learning how to be in the world is how to run through the raindrops and not get wet. So it's an ability to still be moving forward, still be acknowledging the rain, but the word is zigzagging. It's finding ways to shift and alter when things are needed to shift and alter, not really to go sideways. The focus is still ahead, but it's how to have the least amount of raindrops hit as you go through.
What analogy comes to mind in response to your analogy is in reading a book on Twin Flames, actually, that this author was talking about the pinball machine. And a couple of days, when I first had this Kundalini, I was hearing messages, and that's how I kind of jumped the tracks and moved to my next place. I remote viewed it. I heard a message go to Zillow, and I found the house, and I just knew. And I listened. Since then, it's not as immediate. I don't really know. I just know that it happened many, many times where I was directed, or I heard things that were pertinent. So yeah, sorry, I was going to give you an analogy that I heard pinball machine, and then 2 days later I was reading this book, and he has a whole section on the pinball machine, that a way to navigate through the pinball machine is not deal with any bumpers, just kind of have a peaceful life and not rub up against stuff, which is a little bit difficult if you're a reporter that's exposing lies. But I've since kind of adopted that. So what I'm hearing from your analogy is just a maneuvering through where you don't allow these forces or these incidences to alter you or damage you or take you down or deviate from your path, in which in my case is I am devoted to liberating, although I still don't know. Yeah, anyway, so I'll say that I think I shared with you that I'm Egyptian Greek from Montreal, and my first story as a 23-year-old was going to St. Joseph's Oratory and doing a story on the rise in cremation rates. And later on, when I had my near-death experience, I was hit outside of the Bodhi tree, and now defunct Bodhi tree, and dragged 50 feet, and could have died, didn't. But shortly thereafter, I was pulled to go to the morgue. And so I've looked at death really kind of up close. And then I had a remembrance that I used to be part of the funerary process in ancient Egypt, and remembered that we used to take 70 days to usher the soul back to the stars. We used to bury, the people who would afford it in a star map, and finding the wickedness of, here we were putting ormus and frankincense and myrrh, and now we've replaced it with fucking formaldehyde. So in the sense of liberating the soul, which I believe is eternal, and what have you come to any conclusions? And you speak about the fire as opposed to the water. So it made me think of, initially, I was kind of against cremation, and then I'm still kind of reassessing what is the best way to liberate. So do you think that's all BS too? The physical, yeah? So there's no way to properly bury a body? It doesn't matter, in your opinion?
No.
Okay.
Self-definition. That's all that matters. Have you found out who and what you are?
So where does the soul go, in your opinion? I mean, you've had a near-death experience. I have too. I was everywhere and nowhere. I was everywhere and nowhere for those few minutes of, I kind of dissipated into everything, but I was nothing at the same time.
Right. Yeah. That's probably a good point. I'll answer this a little bit, and then, because here it's 10 o'clock for me, so it's already hitting the.
Okay, thank you, Howdie.
But to me, what you're describing, of course, is a trip to the void, which is one of the things that happens to a few people who have near-death experiences. The standard near-death experience, white light, Jesus, grandma, life review, all that kind of stuff. But some get this movement to the void, and it's described exactly as how you've described it, right? This place of, it's nothing and everything at the same time. And that's also a place of emptiness. People hear the word empty, and so they think empty is in nothing, which is true, but empty is also everything, as in total. Both are like two sides of the same emptiness coin. So she's describing the way the void is. And to me, the void is not, you're not outside the matrix yet at the void, but the void is like, how I called it, void or emptiness is the doormat that you're going to wipe your dirty feet on before you exit the matrix. And it's an important experience and realization to have. And it's one of the reasons that in Dzogchen Buddhism, their key amount of their prayers is to keep themselves in what they call the clear light, which is the place of the void, so that at any moment of encroaching death, they are prepared that they're instantly going to be at the void, that they will be able to push themselves to the void instantaneously. And then from that void, they now have the opportunity to, if they had done their other seeing, they would be able to, then you could exit the matrix. So that void, to me, is a very powerful experience to hold on to, and then continually, let's call it access. That's the best way I could describe it, where there's a continuous accessing of that back into this place, where there is now a very watered down projected version of that original emptiness. It's still the void here. It's just, man, we have a lot of stuff to keep our attention on, as opposed to in that place you described, where it's just very different.
Before you
very still.
before you go, I mean, I would disagree that there's a lot of noise, and this isn't, the void is kind of an internal space. When I did have this Kundalini, one of the kind of lessons, because first I heard recalibrate, then I heard anchor in, and I spent a lot of time by myself because I'm an empath and very sensitive. But one of kind of the lessons is I was told, okay, we're going to go into the void. And I accessed it through my heart, where there's an emptiness and a peacefulness. And then this last time I did Bufo, my mission or my intent was to restore my divine soul blueprint. And what I saw was I envisioned a microchief. It was like blue and kind of like industrial, of like, and what a soul would look like, which I know, of course, I can't prove. And then I saw different microfiche layers on top, and I removed them. And then I felt everywhere and nowhere a very peacefulness. And I heard, you're in the void. And then I heard switch, which I still don't know what that means. I'm sure the way I liken it is I've jumped the tracks before, where I've just take a complete different, and I've said to myself, I'm jumping the tracks, like going on a different, I guess, timeline. So I just wanted to share that with you. I still don't really know what switch means, but I do believe that accessing the void is possible without a near-death experience.
Oh yeah, well, let's call it, there's a dissolving that has to happen one way or another.
Yes.
Death is just a really good dissolving principle, but there are other things that will create the dissolving. Yeah.
So Howdie, tell people where they can find you, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me. I'm very grateful.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks. Wow. I guess the easiest place, and again, we've just talked here for things for you to think about, things for you to contemplate. That's all. You don't have to continue with anything else. Just think about things for a while and see where it takes you personally. That's all if something gets you to think, that's all that matters. But if you're looking for other things I've done, probably the easiest place is just go to my website, howdiemickoski.com. You can get access to the books. There's all sorts of free chapters there.
No, I'm saying thanks, Chislas, because he put your website.
And probably from there, I mean, there's the locals community, and there's. But if you're interested in the books, always that's the easiest way to say thank you to an author, is buy one of their books somewhere from any of the many different sellers that exist around there, and I guess just keep looking, keep asking. I guess I'll just say leave with this one little comment, and that is, everybody has one deep, honest question that's personal to each one of you. You have one deep question that is yours and yours alone. And when you find that question, you're almost at the answer. Literally, a lot of the work is to find the exact question that's yours. As soon as you have your true question, you're really close to the answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to stay on Cheese Slice as Howdie jumps off, and share a few things. I don't know if we can now pull up. I have a lot of things to say in regards to George Floyd and the narrative, and how they're bringing it back in regards to pardoning Derek Chauvin, the officer who was accused of murdering George Floyd, who was an FBI informant. And thank you, Howdie. Thank you. So, Cheese Slice, is it possible to pull up my book. I need to turn on the fan and blow my nose. So thank you. Since coming back from an Acapulco, yet again, I mean, I don't get sick, and I have been dealing with on and off fever and blowing my nose. But so I just want to turn on the fan for a moment. So please keep the fort up. I'll be right back in less than 30 seconds. I'm back. Okay, so do you have that? My ears are blocked. Do you have that clip of Ben Shapiro that we can play? This book is a print, and my ears are blocked. Hi, Dale. Thank you, and Doyle. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit under the weather. So this book, I have 8 copies of it. This is a print, which is different than a publish. And it's a colossal book that I wrote for the future, for the records of truth. And that will be a difficult book to find, I believe. It's a whodunit, and it's chock full of FOIA and images. So you can go to maryamhinane.com / this book is being sold because I do not know when the next iteration will come up. And I have been trying to dodge the raindrops of targeting. It's reached levels that very few people I can speak to about. So do you have that Ben Shapiro video?
Did you send it to me in an email?
Yeah, I believe so. It's one of the links I sent you.
Oh, I have it.
Okay,
give me a second.
Great. So if someone invests in this book, they're not only supporting a courageous journalist, they are also investing in preserving truth, history. There's no other book that I have ever come across with this much information on a psychological operation. And while people might think that George Floyd was just another psyop, it ushered in a color revolution. So let's play this clip and then I will speak.
If we are issuing pardons, however, there is one person that President Trump should pardon from federal charges forthwith. It would be incredibly controversial, but I think that it's absolutely necessary. That person is Derek Chauvin. President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. He should. He should pardon him his federal charges. If we are talking about reversing the evils of the last several years in American life, obviously COVID and its handling was a massive evil. Destroyed the economy, set us on a path to fiscal insanity, destroyed children, led to massive health-related cover-ups, just horrifying all the way around. And President Trump has taken on a lot of those things. But when it came to BLM, the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in my lifetime, was in fact the railroading of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd. The evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not, in fact, commit murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was high on fentanyl. He had a significant pre-existing heart condition. George Floyd was saying he could not breathe before he was even out of the car. He was in the car saying he could not breathe. Derek Chauvin, for a large segment of even the tape that was shown, had his knee on George Floyd's shoulder or back, not on his neck. The autopsy of George Floyd showed that he had no damage to his trachea, that probably George Floyd died of excited delirium. There were no accusations, even at trial, that Derek Chauvin had committed a hate crime against George Floyd or that he targeted George Floyd because of his race. Nonetheless, on the basis of extraordinarily scanty evidence, and despite the fact that there was massive pressure on the jury, that the mayor of Minneapolis paid a settlement to the George Floyd family immediately, that the president of the United States suggested that Derek Chauvin was guilty right off the bat, that the jurors were being openly threatened and admitted as much. Despite all of that, Derek Chauvin was convicted on federal charges and pled guilty to federal charges. Derek Chauvin should, in fact, be pardoned on that. We will be covering that a lot more in coming weeks because I think it is worthwhile to remember that there is a man who is rotting in prison because the media decided in the middle of 2020 that they were going to turn a tragic law enforcement stop that ended with the death of a man who had a significant problem with drugs and pre-existing health problems into the raison d'etre of the entire 2020 election. And it led to vast chaos. It led to, again, the destruction of racial comedy in the United States, $2 billion in property damage, and a guy rotting in prison who the evidence demonstrates certainly was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in that case. If we're going to talk about delivering pardons, President Trump, I think, should really seriously consider pardoning on federal charges. He can't pardon on state charges. Derek Chauvin, who is convicted of the murder of George Floyd. As I say, we will be covering this pretty extensively in the coming weeks. Right now, you should go to pardonderek.com and sign our petition asking President Trump to grant justice to Officer Derek Chauvin. That is pardon, P-A-R-D-O-N, Derek.com, P-A-R-D-O-N-D-E-R-E-K.com.
Maryam, you're muted.
I said that's there's a whole movement now that is being initiated by the Daily Wire. I don't know Cheese Slice or the audience. I have not looked at who runs the Daily Wire behind the scenes at the very top, but I find it interesting. I mean, I say it in my book that he would be pardoned. People may not know that 2 of the 3 officers have already been released, with the last one, Tu Tao, the Asian officer, who was basically maestroing the extras, bystanders. And why is my book dangerous? Because did you know that Derek Chauvin graduated from a technical college as a cook, and that he went to the School of Assassins? So there's not really an initiative to reveal the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so a book such as this, replete with receipts, would not be very welcome. I will read a part of Chapter 18, which is Derek Chauvin, off-duty cop, real estate agent, convicted murderer, sacrificial lamb. Now, there is no question that on one layer, the trial, which I covered every single day for Activist Post, every single day, wrote another story and paid very close attention to this sham show trial. And Derek did not get a reasonable trial, and it's part of our constitutional rights. So that's on one layer. Fortunately for our nation of lazy journalists, the Minnesota government kindly published the heavily redacted 79-page personnel file of the 19-year-old veteran for the public's consumption. Was this customary? I had not come across such a thing in my 2-decade-plus career as a journalist. The now 48-year-old's life was roughly sketched out in a series of online papers, academic records, hire reports, transcripts, report cards, and letters. It was as though he was a 2-dimensional character activated into existence for this mission. Joel Gilbert helped me dig up phone numbers for his dad, Michael, a certified accountant, and his mom, Carolyn, who seemed to live outside Minnesota. Neither one returned my calls. Chauvin, his lawyer, and family declined to speak to the media. Why? According to the New York Times, after dozens of interviews with acquaintances, Derek seemed to operate at an emotional distance from those around him. Supposedly, he didn't go to parties and didn't seem to have many friends. Quote, in a group setting, he would never connect and stand there like a small child. I was put off by his lack of communication skills. You never felt he was present. How convenient. Quote, even friends, former officer Derek Chauvin was an enigma, read a headline in the Star Tribune. Besides being a supposed white racist who murdered an innocent black man, the media profiled Derek Michael Chauvin as awkward, amped, and arrogant. He was raised in St. Paul Park, a suburb of St. Paul. His parents divorced when Chauvin was 7 or 8, and his mother, Carolyn, asked for the family home and child support for Derek and his baby sister. But the father ended up with the house and shared custody of Derek. His mother remarried and took his name. Meanwhile, Derek attended 4 elementary schools in 5 years. Only one elementary school was mentioned, and it was torn down in 1993. He attended Park High School in Cottage Grove, but reportedly he did not have a yearbook photo taken for his junior or senior years before graduating in 1994. In articles, he is depicted as a loner who was bullied for being different and disliking sports. He earned a diploma in quantity food preparation for taking classes like baking and shellfish identification at Dakota County Technical College, after which he took a job as a line cook at McDonald's. He studied the culinary arts but ended up a convicted murderer instead, and the first white officer in Minnesota to be criminally prosecuted in the death of a black civilian. I called the fast food joint to check if Derek did indeed work there. Yet the record department told me they didn't keep anything past 10 years and that new management had taken over in 2007. I tried to track down other previous employers and former professors. This sent me down a slew of new rabbit holes. For instance, in 1996, he supposedly worked at Metropolitan Security and Investigative Services. I started looking for that security company and found myself reading about a Minnesota tycoon in an NGO seemingly on steroids. The company Derek worked as a security officer for was owned by a now dead man named Dennis J. Doyle, a philanthropist with an air of James Bond. There is even a tribute website dedicated to his legacy. In the end, none of the phone numbers led anywhere. Unlike George Floyd, there was no second-grade teacher named Waynell Sexton to show us one of Derek's essays or drawings. I also reached out to fellow officers listed on the heavily redacted George Floyd police report. A Minneapolis Police Department spokesman declined comment, citing independent external investigations by the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions and the Federal Bureau. For whatever reason, Derek changed trajectories from cook to cop and studied law enforcement at Inverse Community College from 1995 to 1999. Later, via his attorney, Eric Nelson, I learned that although Derek seemed like an aimless teenager and an average student who didn't really have a strong plan for his life, that changed when he met a police officer at a Target store. According to government-issued records, he became a cop in October 2001, and yet it says he graduated the Metropolitan State University in law enforcement in May 2006. He worked in the 1st, 3rd, and 4th precincts. He would spend most of his career in the 3rd, which had a reputation for citizen complaints and aggressive policing tactics, particularly involving minorities and low-level crimes, according to Abigail Sarah, commissioner for the Minneapolis Police Conduct Oversight Commission. The New York Times reported that from the get-go of his career, Chauvin stood out as gung-ho. When he reported for training after the police academy, Derek showed up in a new white Crown Victoria, outfitted to resemble a police car, recalled one officer who spoke on the condition of anonymity, because talking to the news media could get him fired. Derek always wanted action and continued to pound the streets in one of Minneapolis's busiest precincts on its hardest shift, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., long after many others his age moved to desk jobs or the day shift. So the story goes. This is a pretty lengthy chapter in my 88-page book. I did not plan to write such a tome, but I am thorough. And this is a very juicy deep state thriller. And I would argue, like some person told me to take my book and movie to Ben Shapiro. Really? Wow. Some person told me that does Trump have a copy of your book? Well, in this fake and gay world, that's not going to be possible, because my truth trumps the narrative, even the conservative narrative, and has made my life difficult beyond being able to explain to the regular person and even the truthers out there. So with that said, what are some of your thoughts, Cheese Slice, as far as, discovering that I'm now restricted on Instagram, and God forbid that I stand for myself and be dubbed a victim, despite the fact that I keep getting up and that they have come after my livelihood. And it's not a good look to be asking for money. I'm not peddling any fucking sponsors or precious metal. Go ahead, Cheese Slice.
It just shocked me when you sent me a cat video, which we're about to show here, and you sent it on Instagram, and I clicked on it, and the link it says this is a restricted link, and all it is a cat video, and it's your account on Instagram, which you mostly only post like dance videos and cat videos.
Now
it's restricted. I mean, it says this is sensitive content. I'm like, what? It's a cat video. And that's like your whole life, everything. They kicked you off of the dating app. Like, I don't get it. It's ridiculous how much you're targeted. And I know people don't believe you, but it's just, I see it working with you. I see it all the time, and it's nuts.
Yeah. So I am grateful for people who listen. I have been around for 25 years plus. I'm not a victim. I am a lioness, and I have courage. And I'm not able to be a journalist, and it's okay, because I did what I came to do. I made an award-winning film, and it's won many awards, and it was seminal in putting the importance of the honeybees into our consciousness. And I just didn't tap out of this book, of this investigation. And trust me, George Floyd showed me a lot, taught me a lot. And because I believe of this book, I want to say that, I'm working hard to not be consumed by the events like Howdie mentioned. And I do feel deep, and that perhaps it's the bane of me to feel and to be open and to believe that being open and truthful and raw was a good thing, when in fact I've been throwing my pearls to swine, and maybe I have said too much. And it's a rude awakening to learn this at my age. And thanks to Howdie, of like, oh yeah, the character of Maryam, she's been killed before for speaking out, like Hypatia, like what's the Troy, Cassandra of Troy. And that in the latest that I believe that they have been bothering Snuffleupagus, and that Snuffleupagus believes that I'm the one who is targeting him and gang stalking him. And I would imagine that the powers that be that know everything about us would know that that is so severely painful to my heart after I've shown up to help this man, that now I am the one who's gang stalking him. Is absolutely ridiculous. And that I've been accused of not speaking radical honesty, that anyone who knows me knows that I have no problem saying I'm sorry. I have no problems looking at myself, and that I've had 3 hours of sleep, that Snuffleupagus was actually manifested him in my home only to act out the core wound of being abandoned and his patterns of packing up and leaving, that we had to act that out, and that I can only stand in love and hope that the truth will be revealed, and to say that, yes, I have made the error of speaking to others and letting their warnings out of care for me to do drastic things when I've only just tried to love myself, given I have been burnt and fooled many times by bad actors, by people who maybe were taken over by drugs or demons that have caused damage in my company, and that I'm a little bit in over my head, that I've been praying to the universe to get help in my company of 14 years that helps people, that has beautiful products. I have gone to war over CBD, over attacks from the government, over over Operation Quack Hack, and that I would say that the powers that be know that I would have given my life for this book, meaning I wasn't going to back down, and that the only thing that I care about, for whatever reason that I can't understand, is this man, and that I wanted to help him, and I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what you think of that, Cheese Slice, if anything.
Well, I don't know the full details of what's going on there. You haven't shared all of that yet. As far as him being upset with you, thinking you're going after him or something. But
or that I'm not an honest person.
Yeah, I can't see you doing something like that. So
how would I have the fucking resources? Or
well,
it's like
I don't even know what he's accusing you of. So
I don't actually know either fully. But I do know that they've been, I believe, messing with him, and that it's a very the operations. Like I was speaking to my friend Attila, who I hope to have a show with, who I met 2 years ago in Mexico, and that the level of operation that they are capable of, and that looking back, what happened on the Bright Line could be an experiment to turn on the hive mind and have a group of people act in unison, because getting almost arrested for a non-existent anti-foul language policy, and that to be raw and real and honest. I mean, I know that that's why a lot of people watch me or are grateful for me, but at the same time, who the fuck knew that truth would be such a dangerous act? And obviously, having risked so much for speaking the truth or standing for the truth or looking for the truth, and then be accused of not being radically honest, when if there's something that I've overlooked that I would be happy to take ownership of, and that yes, I've had friends instill fear in me and tell me to do certain things in relationship to this car that I co-signed for, but that ultimately I didn't do any of that, and that my heart is pure, and that in regards to what Howdie said, to kind of not succumb to emotions. I don't know what the audience or you feel, but I'm definitely not lobotomized. I do kind of watch myself and try my best to respond instead of react. And I make mistakes, but we are all human, and to have forgiveness. And so what I've witnessed is that I am an accepting person. Acceptance is a high frequency, and that is not necessarily reciprocated to me, despite my heart and my soul that is pure. So I'm not asking people to feel sorry for me. I'm just sharing. I'm just sharing that I'm trying to dodge the raindrops. And I think, the reason why I shared this video, this cat video, is because this is the approach that I have chosen to take. This fellow cat, and we can watch it. Did you already watch it, Cheese Slice?
The patience on this adult cat.
My patience.
Very stunning. And look how proud the adult cat looks.
Can you play it again?
Yeah, here's from the beginning. I think I started a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows what is going on with the little floof?
He's scared. He's scared. He has trust issues. And I've tried to be that adult cat with Snuffy and not be reactionary and not retaliate back and just be peaceful and hold space. Because that is the better way. It's the better way than devolving, because that big cat could have smacked that little cat. But he made him feel safe.
It wasn't there to do that.
How it looks healing with safe people. The universe, God, sent to help teach you how to receive love. I wanted to send this to Snuffy, but I don't know if it'll fucking say restricted. Maybe I can download it and just, I don't know. I've thanks to Snuffy, who is kind of the opposite of me in that does things in quiet, that if you have one person on one spectrum that says too much and you have another person that says too little, that you can meet halfway, and that who's to say what is reality in this bullshit matrix. Well, how are we doing on time? I'll share one story if people are open to it. that when I had my spiritual awakening, I was raised Coptic Orthodox, and I went to Sunday school. And there was a boy, Mark Malad, that I had a very innocent crush on. We used to listen to Phil Collins, and I went into the Sunday school, and I was told that he was hit by an 18-wheeler. And I set off at 13 to question, where did he go, and why would God take away a small child? And I asked the Sunday school teacher, and her answers were not satisfactory. And then around that time, I was with my mom. This is in Montreal. And I was in, I guess, in a building, and there was a security guard. And he told me about my third eye. And he told me about Om, which I have on my left thumb, which Snuffy also has on his left thumb, just so happens. And yesterday he did admit that he knows me, but he doesn't know me somehow. So he admitted that there is something going on that's beyond this 3D realm. And I was very intrigued by the third eye. And I said, you mean amen? And he said, no, Om. And around the same time, I, as all 13-year-olds do, was listening to Art Bell, and came across the book Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, where she mentions the Bodhi Tree, a metaphysical bookstore on Melrose Avenue. And that place, she sought refuge and found a lot of answers. So I went off to, he later died. Mark died. He was in a coma. And I was not able to go to the funeral because what had happened was he was living in Montreal, and the father had an affair, and the mother moved to Ottawa, which is about 2 hours away. And so he would now occasionally come to Sunday school, but I wouldn't see him on the regular as I did before. And so when he died, I mean, I was 13, I didn't drive. I didn't know where he was buried, but I became kind of obsessed with paying my respects and also communicating with him. And I started practicing out-of-body experiences. And I was never successful. I got close to vibrating and almost exiting, and then I heard a voice, you better not do that because someone else might take over your body. And it freaked me out because that was not a 13-year-old's thought. And so I stopped, but I didn't stop thinking about Mark. So flash forward, I'm now 18 about, and my grandfather died at 99 years old. I didn't feel bad. I had, I guess, a different perspective on death. I didn't feel bad. I thought he lived his life, excuse me. And my cousins and I were in a limo, and we were going in the outskirts of Montreal. I don't even know the name of the cemetery. And for whatever reason, I know later, I asked my cousin, do you think that Mark was buried here? I say for whatever reason, because she was younger, and how would she know? But the reason why I asked her was because as we were putting my grandfather into the ground, she spotted him, and she tapped me on the shoulder, and he was 2 rows. Because when I got there, I asked her, do you think he's buried here? And I said, okay, God, if it's meant to be, I will find him. And when I got to the cemetery, I was like, wow, this is like a huge place. What are the chances? And I let it go, excuse me. And then she tapped me on the shoulder, and he was 2 rows behind. He had a granite tombstone, And I remember taking a flower, maybe it was a carnation, and going to pay my respects. And I was so happy because I still lived in the magical world of soul. And my world was magical. I played, I had a vivid imagination, which is soul. So that was a confirmation. I continued kind of my investigations, early investigations. And my mom got married and we went to Cuba. And now, I don't know, maybe it was like 2 years later or so. And it literally before I'm what about to share, I was in bed in Cuba and I tapped into Mark and I wondered how he was doing. And I was on the beach the very next day, and I'm in Cuba, and there were some girls, and one of the girls said, "Are you Indian?" And I said, "No, I'm Egyptian Greek." And she said, "Oh, I used to know an Egyptian once, but he was hit by an 18-wheeler. And I said, "Don't tell me his name was Mark Malad." And she said, "Yeah." And I learned what they did as far as the memorial and how they commemorated his life. And I knew that the universe was giving me a message about what is possible beyond this 3D bullshit. I didn't know about the 3D bullshit. I was a sheltered Montreal girl in an Egyptian Greek household with a strict father. And now, one of my first stories was my first story for the Montreal Gazette is I decided to do a story on the rise of cremation rates. Like all 23-year-olds want to go and meet the man who burns the bodies underground, right? And so I was looking at the retorts, the ovens, and there was a bucket and there were metal pieces in there. And I picked up a piece and I said, "What's this?" And he said, this is a hip socket. And I looked at it and go, wow, I would never want to have this in my flesh. Fast forward to me getting hit by not an 18-wheeler, but an SUV. And me waking up with a 13-fucking-inch titanium rod in my leg and me almost dying. And then later on going to the coroner's office and looking at all the dead bodies. So after my near-death experience, I was working with a woman, Sally Adderton, and we were channeling my higher self, where she told me that I would be in service and that I would be working with sisters, which is the honeybees and the sisterhood. And we were doing one lesson where we were talking about my guides. And I told her, well, I think there's this boy that died, and I think he's one of my guides. And she told me he was one of my guides. She said that he's in charge of a lot of people. He's overseeing a lot of people, including his sister. And even though I'm woo-woo or one part woo, I am actually quite skeptical and data-driven. And I said to myself, well, she's fucking lying. He doesn't have a sister. He has a brother. And I started asking her questions. And she said, Maryam, I'm not going to waste this session with your doubts. And we hung up. And I looked up every Malad in the phone book. This is a while ago. I believe it must have been, 1997. So there were still phone books, and I don't know how I found Toronto and Montreal Malads because I didn't know. And I started calling. I didn't know what I was doing. So I told myself, well, I always wanted a photo of Mark for my altar. And I knew he had a brother, John. So I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to John. But I was really moving from a hunch. So I'm at the second to last phone number. And a girl who must have been about my age when Mark died picked up. And I said, I know this sounds crazy, but about 15 years ago, I had a friend die, and I knew him from Sunday school. And he's very significant in my life. And she had told me, right, that Sally had told me that he was looking over his sister. And so she says, oh, my father had a son, but my father had a son. So I say, oh my God, he does have a sister. So the father had a child with his new wife, and she must have been, I don't know, 6 months, year tops, before he died. And I said, okay, well, I just want you to know, I know this sounds a little bit out there, but I was told that he's looking over you. Now, she must be like literally 14, 15, 16 tops. And she says, I know. And I was like, okay, well, you have a relationship with him. So I said, can I have John's number? That's the brother. And she said, oh, my dad doesn't talk to his son. And I'm like, wait a second. You lost a son and you have another son and you don't talk to him? Well, that's fucked up, right? So, okay, I hung up the phone and then I called my last number, which was the mother. And it so happens that my father went on a date with Mark's mother. And she was so happy that I remembered him, that after all these years, I still had him in my heart, and that he was so significant. I mean, he was the reason for my spiritual awakening. And he had showed me that there's something beyond the veil and magic does exist. And so she told me she would send me a photo of Mark for my altar, which I eventually got. So here I was, this like 30-year-old looking at a boy of 12 on the beach with his hands out, stretched out, and it said Mark. And she gave me John's number. But I knew that I didn't really want to talk to John. That wasn't the whole reason. So I got John's number, the brother, and I would like it if you could give this to your father. And then the mom went on a vacation, and I called her a month later, and I thanked her for the photo that I received, that I put on my altar. And she told me, you won't believe it. John's father called. And so Mark worked through me to put him in touch, put the father and the son in touch. And I was taught a big lesson of faith. And Mark has taught me a lot, but I somehow forgot along the way in the magic of the universe until I met Snuffy. And yesterday, like I said, he admitted, he said, I know you, but I don't know you. And I knew that I wasn't crazy, and that it's my heart and my faith in knowing that something bigger is going on. So I just wanted to share that because it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful, fantastical story that you can connect with people after death, and that the soul, the energy doesn't die. And when I had my near-death experience, like I told Howdie, I was everything and nothing at the same time. And when I came back to my body, I was not the same. I had supernasal powers. I still pop off street lights. I realized that I was an empath. And I had to learn how to walk again. And if it wasn't for my faith in something that can't be seen, who the fuck knows? Who the fuck knows? I'd still be limping. I'd still have that metal rod in my leg. And I stand for magic. And I do stand for unconditional love. And I stand for what that cat did, to not devolve into mediocrity like everybody fucking else. And I would invite you to look at the story of yourself and to be grateful. And that Howdie has a lot of wisdom that he's sharing. It doesn't mean he's 100% right. Like I am. I stand to provoke thought and to stand for the magical and the impossible. So thanks for listening to that story about Mark Malad and my spiritual awakening, which I knew I put myself on the back burner to write this historical book that I know is for the future and is for the records. When the Ministry of fucking Truth is even scrubbing archive.org, and they're scrubbing me from existence. And I guess in the end, it's all part of my ego death. And the ego is not bad, but there's way beyond that. And, whether Ascension very likely could be another level to this matrix when the new simulation gets, kicked up, that there is something beyond this 3D plane. And who the fuck is going to say that this is real when this is an inverted matrix of lies and deception? But you can go within yourself and find your own truth. And the world that I live in and contemplate, which I believe is a fifth dimension of contemplation and peace in my heart, it's much more enjoyable than all of this fake and gay shit. And speaking of fake and gay, I will show one more clip, which was scrubbed, of course, from TikTok. And I'm going to go to my Instagram and I'll share it with you if I can access my own Instagram. So there's no comments or from people. Do you have anything to say in regards to my story? Cheese Slice, are you there? Hello?
I'm here.
What do you think of my story?
The one about the
man, the
when
boy.
you were a teenager?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Do you think it's crazy?
Well, at first I thought you were talking about Snuffy. And then I realized you weren't.
I'm getting this clip. Hold on. Hold on, folks. Hold on. There must be comments. Come on. Ask some comments. Are there people watching? Why so quiet? Okay, I'm on 3 hours of sleep, so I'm putting it in the private chat.
100 people watching on Twitter.
Cheese Slice. I don't know if there's any other clips that I shared.
Yeah, you didn't.
I will ask for prayers. I believe in miracle. I will say that yesterday I wanted to give a pendant that says believe in miracles, and that Snuffy thought I was trying to tag the fucking car, which is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy, meaning it's possible that I would do that, but that's not what I was doing. So this happened last Saturday.
Fake and gay.
Yes.
I seen that President Carter is.
Is there no sound?
Do you have this on YouTube or something, or Rumble?
Hello? Is there no sound?
No, there's sound, but it's so small. Do we have it on YouTube or Rumble so it'll be full screen?
Oops, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You still can't hear me?
Okay, now I can. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was asking, do you have this on YouTube or Rumble so we can make it full screen? Because I can't make it any bigger than this.
No.
Because this
I have it on Twitter, but would that make a difference?
Maybe because this is a landscape video.
Yeah. It's a landscape. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I mean, I can play it as it is, but you won't be able to see it. You'll just be able to hear it.
I don't think it's fine. It's just about hearing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Miriam,
No,
you say it's all fake and gay, right? You always say it's fake and gay.
Yes.
I seen at President Carter's funeral not too long ago. Where Trump and Obama were buddy at Carter's funeral not too long ago.
They're all buddies, man. That's what people don't get. Behind the scenes, they're all having dinner with each other, stroking each other off, talking about how they're going to fuck over the American people. That's what they do.
It's all fake and gay.
Yay, kid! Yay!
Thank you. Thank you. It's all fake and gay.
Gay comes from
Absolutely.
the 13th century Germanic origin and full of birth and showy. Okay? So gay is not offensive. And if you have a person who's infected with the virus of wokeism, you teach them, kids, you tell them the proper etymology is that gay means full of mirth and showy. It means extravagant. And then it meant happy. And now it means homosexual. And now it means this world.
Just like the rainbow. I had my aunt who was
They're not
all
familiar
like,
with the Flintstones.
I used to take their vitamins.
We'll have a gay old time.
Exactly.
I forgot about that.
When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba dabba do time, a dabba do time. We'll have a gay old time.
So that was taken off of TikTok. I violated some communist guidelines, of course. And I'm sure someone else could post that without issue, but they're not on a targeted shit list. And as we move forward in this age of Aquarius, where there will be disclosures, but there'll be a lot of BS as well. I'm sure more truth will bubble up to the surface, and hopefully people can take a deep dive within themselves and find what's true for them, because all that remains in the end is the soul. I haven't cracked the code, but I do think being told I've been shown the void, and it's kind of maybe confusing on what is real and what is not real, knowing that this is a inverted matrix of bullshit and deception. And I believe love is real, love that transcends diamonds instead of forever, and that integrity, honesty, sacredness to the best of your ability. So, okay, folks, I think that's all the links I've shared, right? And if there's no questions or comments, I would say thank you. I would say that if you enjoy the content, please support the channel. I don't do this for monetization, and I would love your support. I would love your support. I don't know, Cheese Slice, if you want to say anything.
Oh yeah, if you can support Maryam, please do. She works really hard all week on all the stuff and preparing for these interviews. And yeah, I mean, if you enjoy the content, just help her out, because that's what keeps the show going.
Yeah, and it goes to Cheese Slice, part of it. And when I do get, I do take also Bitcoin. I have a wallet because people have said they can't find me on Zelle. Although I can put, and people can get the book. You can invest in a book that you will be able to sell for more money, if that's what you care about, money. And it's a historical book, and it's a money back guarantee. That's for effing sure. So that's one way you can give back and get something in return, because it is an exchange of energy. And you can also go to honeycolony.com and use BLady15 or BLady for a discount. I also have lots of offerings on Maryam Hinane. You can get a book on Tavistock for a tip. And anyone that wants to work with me to find their soul's purpose and to incorporate magic back into your life, I'm an accredited functional medicine coach. I am a psychic. I am an intuitive, and I do combine my accreditation as a health coach with my spirituality. And that's the direction that I want to move towards, because I am pretty much a retired journalist now that has reached the glass ceiling. In an alternative universe, Darnella, who won a Pulitzer Prize for taking footage, that I am the recipient of a Pulitzer Prize for this historic book, which after this 8 copies are gone, I am praying that the book will come out in conjunction with the 5th year anniversary, because it was messed with, the formatting was messed with. And I will say that I think the powers that be know that I wouldn't have shut down this book. You know, if you've seen The 3-Body Problem, Augie, the nanoscientist, is told to shut down her work or else they will kill her. And she does shut down her work, where I was like, you can take me out. I've done what I've come to do here on planet. This go around, I feel like I've done service and I've given back. But I think the powers that be would know that one thing that I do care about is Snuffleupagus for whatever reason. Because it's the deepest non-relationship I've ever had with someone. I've never met a soul so deep and beautiful. All right, folks, have a beautiful weekend. I think it's a Virgo full moon in 5 days. You could argue that the moon is also not real. And yeah, I don't know. There's people who believe not to give ode to the moon, but the moon does impact the tide and doesn't impact menstrual cycles, and so do the other planets. So next week, let's see what's on the roster for next week as far as guests. My goal still is to have more than one show. Oh yeah, I'm actually not sure what I have in store, because my guest, I have to change the guest. So it's a surprise. I'm not sure, but I'll let you guys know. Thank you, Cheese Slice. Again, any support is appreciated. Any tips? I don't know if you put in the comments the place to tip, so that I can pass it on to Cheese Slice, who is so kind that he continues to work with me when many, many weeks I'm unable to pay him. Yeah, that's my Cash App. And then I don't know if you could put it in the comments. You can, and then also my Zelle. Should I put it in the public comments? You know, it's like the cost of a coffee. Thank you, Cheese Slice. And then Zelle is, if you find me there, because sometimes, and then if someone wants to give crypto of any sort, then they can reach me on Maryam Hinane, Maryam@honeycolony.com, and I can give you a wallet address. All right, blessings, people, and value kindness, giving back, looking within, and taking ownership of your shit. Thank you. Thanks, Cheese Slice. Blessings, everyone. Could take us out.
Something has prompted you to embark on a journey toward a healthier you. Perhaps it was a health scare, or the chemicals you want to avoid in conventional foods, or maybe you simply want more energy. But with so many different types of diets, lifestyle disciplines, pricey supplements that claim they antioxidize your life, and vendors that are more interested in their bottom line, Who can you really trust? Honey Colony brings people together who want to optimize their health through trustworthy information and top-notch products. We bring together quality vendors, renowned nutritional experts, and health-conscious people. Learn, share, and shop health.